Hi, I'm Jen Wozny from Put the Light Here, and I just wanted to do a short video talking about an article that I wrote recently and which has been getting a lot of engagement and interest. The article is Kids and Imaginary Friends: How to Know When It's Really a Spirit and What to Do If It's a Bad One. So, the idea that kids sometimes do have active imaginations and they create friends of their own who are not actually real, which is fine. But there are some times when a child is actually seeing a spirit world, and we know that the spirit world is all around us. That is just something that quantum physics and science is telling us, even though we don't necessarily know about it in our mainstream culture, especially if you're located in North America or somewhere in the West. However, spiritual reality is real, it is part of our reality, and it is our duty as parents, teachers, caregivers, adults to acknowledge that it's real and that children are very sensitive to connecting with the spirit world, and that therefore they might be having experiences that we need to know about. So I led off in my article with a true story. This is where a child had a spirit friend. It was a malevolent spirit friend. The household they were in wasn't very spiritual and aware of what was happening. One day, the spirit friend encouraged the child to end their life. The child went to the kitchen, got a knife, and thankfully, at that time, a parent walked in and intervened. The child is okay, but I was called in and I removed the spirit from that child, as well as healed the reason why the child was vulnerable to that spirit in the first place. Once that was done, the child returned to their normal, happy self. So that is a true story, and that type of story happens literally every day all over the planet because the spirit world is real, but we are not educated about that fact, and therefore we don't notice it even when our child is saying, I have a spirit friend, mommy, or I have a spirit friend, daddy. And so, what we want to do if a child has an imaginary friend is determine whether it is really a spirit. And so, in the article, I do provide you with questions to ask your child to help diagnose what is really going on. Basically, we want to have an open mind and a curious mind and investigate. Ask all sorts of questions about, describing the spirit. What do they look like? What do they sound like? How do they make you feel? Um, Things like that. Generally, you should be able to understand if it's a spirit or an imaginary friend simply based on the answers, or also based on your child's playtime habits. You know, if your child always has a tea party set up with teddy bears, an imaginary tea, and the teddy bear says something to you, and your child passes that on, chances are that is just an imaginary friend. And once the teddy bear gets put away and the imaginary tea gets poured out and cleaned up, the bear doesn't have anything to say. Usually something like that is an imaginary friend, not a spirit. A spirit, however, has the capability of traveling with you. It is not local. It is not contained to the physical world. So if you go on vacation and the spirit friend comes with you, that is an indication that it might actually indeed be a spirit. If you have diagnosed the situation and realized that it happens to just be an imaginary friend, wonderful, now you know. However, you always want to be on the lookout for spirits who show up because, again, the spirit world is real and children have their senses open, usually, to connecting with it. If you've decided that it is a spirit, then the next step to do is determine whether it's a good one or a bad one. Because again, with the example that I shared earlier, there can be spirits who are very bad influences for our children. So there are questions that you can ask to diagnose whether it's good or bad. Generally speaking, just as with people, a good spirit will feel warm. There will be a warmth quality to them. There will be a loving quality. They will even be protective of your child. They will be absolutely open and honest with you and willing to speak with you as the adult who is in charge of this child. They generally don't do any harm. They're just there to keep your child company or to provide them some guidance or, again, protection throughout life. Benevolent spirits often come in the form of our ancestors. So if there's anyone who's crossed over to the other side in your family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, great-grandparents, even pets, they might actually come back in spirit form to be with the child in order to help them and, again, keep them company. Malevolent spirits, on the other hand, often have a coldness or a meanness to them. You can tell sometimes by the words that they use if they're a bad spirit because, for example, they'll use nasty words or they'll swear. Note that Some of the bad spirits are very narcissistic. So if you've ever encountered a narcissist in human form, you know they're very charming, they're very slick. They will stroke your ego and try to make you feel good so that you don't see them clearly. If there is a spirit who constantly praises your child or constantly praises you and you can't really get anything real out of them, chances are that is just narcissism at work, and that is therefore a bad spirit. If you have decided that it is a spirit and it is bad, the next thing you need to do is get help from someone who is trained to deal with this. A lot of people turn to superficial types of tools in order to, get the spirit out of the room. They'll smudge, burn sage. They'll use crystals. They'll use affirmations or declarations and just like say, you don't have permission to be here. Those are just annoyances to the spirit world. Generally, they are not strong enough to actually remove the spirit altogether. You need to find someone who is acknowledges the bad side of the spirit world, and B, is trained in order to work with that energy. Once you have found that person, you want to do two things. First, you want to remove the bad spirit. Second, you want to heal the reason why your child was vulnerable to that spirit in the first place. Again, it's a two-step process. Remove the bad influence and heal the reason why it was there. If you have not healed the reason why it was there, then your child will be forever vulnerable to new intrusions. If it's a spirit friend, whether it's good or bad, you have work to do. It is your responsibility and duty to the child to learn about the rest of reality, the spirit world, psychic abilities, simply for the sake of supporting your child and joining them in their experiences, which are very real. Being psychic doesn't mean anything weird. Every human being, all 7 billion of us who are alive right now, have psychic abilities. It's simply a matter of whether we acknowledge them and whether we've developed them, and whether it's right for us to develop them in this lifetime. But it is just built into the human form to be psychic, to have our abilities and our sensitivities open to this other reality that surrounds us. So learn about psychic abilities, learn about the spirit world, but you want to understand all sides of the spirit world. It's not all love and light. It is also, as with humans, dark and kind of icky. So, and which is fine. It's not a big deal. It's not anything worrisome or scary. It just is. And knowing about the dark side simply means that we're better able to avoid it in the same way that we would avoid a dark alley at nighttime. We would not walk down that. It's saying, it's not bad. It's not scary. It's just we know better. And so the same is true for the spirit world. We just want to know, be on the lookout. Because there are some things out there that are not so positive. And the better that we know, the better that we are able to support our family. I also wanted to mention the subject of nightmares and scary monsters. Sometimes it is not a nightmare, it is real. Sometimes it is not just a figment of the imagination. It really is a negative entity in the room with your child at night causing them harm. I have a lot of clients now who are adults who are now dealing with the fact that when they were children, they had these negative spiritual experiences that caused a lot of harm, but which were not taken seriously because their parents were not spiritual or were not familiar with the fact that this really happens. And so in the article, there is much more guidance and information about the nightmares and scary monsters. I invite you to check it out. And again, if you do need some help, I would be happy to do so. I do work with children. I work entirely with their consent. Otherwise, we work with the adult who is connected to the child to help clear the energy of the family or the home that they're living in. I also do mentoring and coaching to help people one-on-one develop their abilities and become more aware of the reality of the spirit world. I also have a course, Cultivate Your Psychic and Healing Abilities, if you'd like to develop your own sensitivities for the sake of empowering yourself and learning about the spirit world. So I invite you to check out the article at putthelighthere.com.